Hi there, Bill Hitchcock. Got a fantastic program for you. We are going to be having a nice little conversation with Captain Joe Tunstall. He's with the Carolina Traditions Guide Company and also the Cape Lookout Fly Fishers. We're going to be talking about Mondo. I don't know if you can really see how Mondo that is. Bluefish being caught right now with the fly. Joe's going to talk about fly fishing, how you can catch these really big bluefish off of the fly, how economical it is. He's also going to talk about other fish such as drum and flounder and trout that you can catch with a fly. And there's also a meeting coming up with the Cape Lookout Fly Fishers on April 7th. He's going to be talking about this very thing, and you can go there in person and see him. He'll be in Morehead City. But enough of me. We did a Zoom call with Captain Joe Tunstall. Let's see what he has to say about big bluefish and fly fishing. Joe, not all of us, there's a lot we want to talk about. The thing that really caught my eye is you're holding this big, like Hatteras type blue, and you're fly fishing, and you're going to be doing a seminar for the Cape Lookout Fly Fishers on it, and that just caught my attention. Fly fishing, how common is that now? I remember like in the 90s it started to catch on. How common is fly fishing right now?
Well, our fall fishery is world class, Mr. Bill. When it comes down to false albacore, we have people that come from all over the world, all over the country. A lot of people from New England, the Midwest states. People come from the western states that typically fly fish primarily on the lakes or the streams for trout and stuff, big river systems. So our false albacore is world class, and if you come out and fish that time of year, you'll see quite a few fly fishermen. Whereas mostly through the summer, spring and summer, most of your fly fishermen are going to be confined to the back creeks and stuff, drum fishing and all that. And so that's why people, when they see 30 guys out fly fishing in the fall in the hook of the Cape, they're like, wow, really it kind of, at least half of that goes on all year round. It's just most of those guys are fishing the backwater, and then you'll see them chopper blues, bonito, and when the false albacore come back into the beach on their way back up, you'll see them come in then. But I'd say, it worked, and we got to give Joe Shoot credit here because really, when you were doing your show and before that, he was the first one around, and I remember everyone was like, they sit outside Freeman's and be like, that's that guy that fly fishes or whatever. And he was kind of a joke. Well, joke's on you. Now it's a big industry around here. And then, of course, as you mentioned before in another segment that you did, George Bush Sr. came here for many years, probably 15, 17 years, and fly fish for false albacore here. So,
well, here's what I wanted to get across to people. In the 90s, like I alluded at the beginning, that in the 90s when I started seeing a transition here, at least in eastern North Carolina or coastal North Carolina, into fly fishing. And one of the reasons why is it used to be perceived as a rich man's sport, which required a rich man's pocketbook. It's not like that anymore, is it?
No, sir. Thank you. And I'm glad you brought that up because if you ask around about me, that was my premise. My entire premise coming into fly fishing was to let people know that you don't have to drop $2,000. It's not, it's not an eccentric sport necessarily. It is a more challenging sport. If you like to hunt, a lot of my people bird hunt, deer hunt, and of course they fly fish, other parts of the world. But it's really just a personal challenge. That's how I got into it. And then when I began falling in love with it, I just wanted to turn it in. I wanted my entire optic, the entire objective that I wanted to achieve was to let people know that you can come into this sport. And especially now, it's had another resurgence. There was, we like to talk about, there was a river runs through it. That was a big deal. And now, since COVID, there's been another big deal. And there's lots of groups, Project Healing Waters, a veterans group. We've been involved with that, the Albacore Redfish Festival for 10, 15 years now. That's, mostly fly fishing. And it's big with veterans groups because it teaches them a discipline. And that's really what it boils down to. It's a choice that you make. It's a discipline. It's the next challenge. And there's some really nice kits out there for $300-400 that you can get into, which is what a good spinning rod costs. If you're going to really love spin fishing, you want to buy a quality setup. It's easy to spend $300, $350, $400 on a good spinning rod.
Well, in catch, well, I just spilled the beans. Fly fishing is generally associated with catch and release as well, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And that's a wise way to be anyway, because there's beyond anybody's doubt there's more recreational fishing activity and people doing it than there's ever been my entire life. And I can go on and fill this whole segment up with stories about that going back my life. And I'm sure you can too. And just how many boats you see even on a weekday during the warmer months, or even the fall months for speckled trout for that matter. And so catch and release is a wise thing. I'm fortunate to live on the coast, and so I still release, 30 to 1 from what I keep, even on charters. But I prefer not to put any fish in the freezer. But I'm fortunate to live here, and then I catch my fish and I catch what I want to eat. I prepare it properly. I leave it in the refrigerator, maybe 3 or 4 days if I'm busy or something, and plan a meal, and then I'll cook my redfish or make my bonito. I like to eat my Atlantic bonito in a poke bowl is how I like to eat that. Or whatever. My Spanish. I eat bluefish too. Good fresh bluefish is hard to beat.
Well, one of my stories when I hear people talk about bluefish is many. I'm glad this is the one reason why I'm glad Sportsman's Pier isn't around anymore. Because me and a buddy of mine used to go to the end of Sportsman's Pier, catch bluefish. And we had a little fry daddy at the end of the pier. We made a mixture out of a pancake mix and beer. That was our batter. And catch the bluefish, fillet the bluefish, dip the bluefish, fry the bluefish, eat the bluefish. Nothing better. Now, I want to jump into something here. I don't want to get into the mechanics per se of fly fishing. Obviously, everybody's seen this action going
Yeah.
on. I want to get into is this strictly sight casting? Do you have to see? Of course, you're going to have to know where they are. You're not trolling and like offshore trolling for tuna, dolphin, wahoo. Basically, you're throwing your baits out there and motivating around until something hits it. You're not doing that with fly fishing. So, how do you do this? You just got to know where they are.
Well, it is primarily sight fishing. As far as what I do goes, until you get around to speckled trout fishing in the fall, it's pretty much you have to have a desire to want to sight fish. And yes, I'm staying in contact just like any other guide does, any other good guide. He knows where those fish have been. He knows what tides they've been on. So I'm going out there. I'm not just, taking a wild stab at it. I know about where I'm going. I know about how those fish are behaving. I try to plan my trips around what time I want to be where I am, forecast, tide, etc. And it is primarily sight fishing. In general, the albacore, big sight fishing, bluefish, even the Spanish mackerel, you're around them. There's all different varieties of ways that those Spanish tell you they're there. Some are more subtle than others. And the same with the redfish. I do believe in Joe Shoot's rule that you catch more fish when the fly is in the water. So I try to work with my people and keep the fly line out in front of the boat where it's moving. Obviously it's looked down upon with the false albacore, but when you're moving from spot to spot, you can keep the fly line out on the side of the boat. That'll produce bites. But primarily, yes, Mr. Bill, it is sight fishing. There's these fish, or I'm telling them if they can't see the fish, where the fish are and what kind of presentation they need to put out. So primarily it is sight fishing.
And as we may mention before, it is primarily catch and release. And I would assume just by the nature of a fly that you're primarily mouth hooking these fish. That you're not getting that gut hook like when I'm out there flounder fishing or when I could with say a live finger mullet. And sometimes, like in the sound, they don't hit it. They just kind of go up the tail, up the tail, up the tail, and ingest it. You don't have that situation very often, do you, while fly fishing?
No, sir. And you'll notice in most of those pictures I sent you, you'll all see a good corner of the mouth hook set. And that's not using the circle. I do have some wider gap hooks, but that's just a standard J hook. And that's mainly because you're keeping, and even when you're spin fishing, you should keep good contact with your lure. And I try to teach people that because most of what I do is shallow fishing, sight fishing, etc., fishing groups of fish. And so keeping good contact with your lure, whether it's a fly or a nice plug like this, keeping good contact with that lure is key. And so if you've got good contact with that, when he comes up and grabs it, And then, I even do this with spin fishing. You need to keep, a lot of people make a mistake with fly fishing. We call it the Appalachian high stick. And that's where you lift that rod way up. There's no need to do that in the salt water. Everything's low. It's I tell people, from the brim of your hat down, basically from the line of sight down. And actually, the lower the better. You can put 2 or 3 guides on that 9-foot fly rod down in the water, and that keeps that fly line tight, and you're in good contact with it. And so when that fish comes up and grabs it, if you're not quick enough to give it a strip set, you've got tight contact. You've got the water taking up the slack. The fish grabs it, takes off and turns, and you get a nice corner of the mouth hook set at our bottom of the jaw, but usually it's the corner somewhere.
Well, you just described some of the mechanics in fly fishing. I probably should ask, how complex is it? Can anybody? I mean, I've seen old guys like me and older fly fishing, and I've seen young people. Is there really how big of a? Maybe the best question is, how big of a learning curve? If I've just been a rod and reel guys, how difficult is it to switch over to fly fishing?
Well, that's the beauty of Bluefish and Spanish, that we're so blessed with that 8 months, maybe even 10 months out of the year. Is they're a great fish to learn and get your confidence on. There's an abundance of them. You can do it from the surf. You can do it from your kayak. You can do it from a boat. You can go with a guide. You can go with a buddy, as long as the buddy's prepared. I say the biggest learning curve, Mr. Bill, I think I can teach anybody. And Lefty Cray used to say that he can teach anybody but the woman he loves how to fly fish. But I think I could teach anybody that's willing to learn, anybody that has the desire to up their game, to have a challenge. And I do. I have a client, the one who sent me these lures. He came to spin fish, and he said, I've only mountain fly fish. This is something I've always wanted to do on his bucket list, but he wasn't prepared to do it that day. And I taught him how to do it, and he caught several bluefish that day. And he was in his 60s. So he was retired, upper 60s. So I believe that anybody that has the will, I will say this, having a little bit of decent balance, which, we all lose our sea legs if we don't spend as much time on the water as avids or guides. But, sea legs matters because it's kind of easier to stand up. It's not sitting on the bow of a boat in a bass chair. It's easier when you stand up, because line management in saltwater is extremely important. And as long as you've got good line management, halfway balance enough to stand on a moving boat, and my Seahawk's bigger, so you don't have to stand up on the bow or nothing. You're just in the front of the boat. But about anybody really, I don't think there's any limitations. If you believe you can, you can. We teach disabled veterans how to fly fish and take them out for the Albie Fest all the time. Guys with artificial limbs and missing fingers, even one-armed guys. I mean, it's just a matter of having the will to want to learn and want to do it.
Let me add this. One of the aspects to fly fishing is fly tying. Now, is that required? I mean, there's folks like me that, I'm not really interested in making a fly. And I understand one of the virtues of making a fly is you can make it specifically to your needs,
right.
Or rather the fish's needs. By the way, it just made me think of something. Dick Henry, who started Henry's Tackle and became Avis Sports and Big Rock Sports and whatever. One time I was at their annual show, and I was talking to Dick, and I said they had Sea Striker. And I said, how many new lures do you make a year? He says, we make about 200. And I thought that was strange. I said, well, that seems that's it. He said, we make about 200. He said, but only about 3 stick. I said, each year. So you're making 200 new lures and whatever, but only 3 stick. He says, yeah. And I thought, and I was just confused. And Dick looked at me. He says, Bill, we're not catching fish. We're catching fishermen. Well, gotcha. So back to my question about fly tying. How complex is it? Do I have to do it if I have no interest in it? Tell me about fly tying.
No, I'll be glad to. And actually, just to give you a little backstory, that's how I started. I started tying like tails like this on a lure. I started tying tipped tails for sting silvers, which is what I used to use. Well, this is a Clark spoon, obviously. My friend Clark Spoon, Christian Bedsworth, his father being Little George, the legend, by the way. But I started tying tipped tails, which is basically a fly for these hooks, and that's how I started. And I did it. I didn't have a vise or anything. I used to do it by hand, or I'd actually use like a small vise, like you would do work with. And it was actually after I'd been doing it for a long time that I started. That's actually how I really got into fly fishing, got so hung up on tying tipped hooks that I got into fly fishing. But it's not that hard. You can do it anytime you want, but you don't have to do it, because we're lucky enough to have Cape Lookout Fly Shop with Captain Joe Shoot here in Atlantic Beach locally. If you're in Swansboro, there's Soundside, Perry McFly's business. And then if you're in Wilmington, there's Intercoastal Angler. So there's fly shops around where you can go buy your flies from. You don't have to make them. Making them is a choice. If that's something you want to do, which also there's a lot of good, again, I got to go back to Project Healing Waters. That's one of the things they teach their people, is to tie their flies, because it's like therapy, and it is. And a lot of my friends, we do it for that. We've had a bad day, a bad week. We go sit down, we tie 10, 15 flies, something like that. But you don't have to. There's plenty of people online that sell them. I'll sell them to some people. I don't usually do that because it takes a lot of time, but I will. There's other guides here. No, you don't have to tie your own flies to do it. No, And honestly, when you get onto them little Taylor class bluefish, them little Taylor cut ones, they'll eat just about anything. You could probably just take a shiny hook and throw it out there and they'll eat it. These choppers aren't always that easy, but so it's nothing that you have to do. No. And that's all it is. And if you come fish with someone like me, you don't even have to have a rod, but I can hook you up with all of that.
I'm smiling because I called the Taylor blues, the smaller bluefish, piranha. And if anybody's been like on a pier, throwing out the classic gotcha plug, when you're bringing in a bluefish, watch all the other bluefish coming up and hitting on him. So, before I forget, you've got this event coming up with the Cape Lookout Fly Fishers. Let me scroll on down here. It's going to be, I don't know who wrote this. Maybe you wrote this, but the little announcement says, fellow fly flingers and fish whisperers. Mark your calendars on Monday, April 7th, 2025 at precisely 6:03, because 6 is just too predictable. Gathering at the world famous Cox's Family Restaurant and International Convention Center. Okay, mostly known for great food and big portions at Cox's. So tell us about that. Now, this is strictly about bluefish fly fishing, right?
This particular, we try to do, yes, that is the Cape Lookout Fly Fishers. We typically have moved to meeting the second Monday of every month, so we've moved this one up to April 7th. Who wrote that is the legendary Captain Rod McFly, who was very good friends with our board of director boss, and that is Lee Dixon. So he's in friends. That's the legendary enigma Rod McFly that writes those. And if you keep up with our fly club, you'll find that there are some very entertaining audits to our fly meetings and intros. So that's where you get that from. Fly Club's $40 a year. We meet once a month and we have events. And this is just one of the events. We try to have guest speakers every month through most of the meetings out of the year. But we also did other things. You came by and you came to our fly tying clinic. Before that, we had a casting clinic. We try to plan events. We have a club outing at the pond. We're going to try to do a shad day, a striper day, a bluefish Spanish day, an albacore day, and then we'll do a pig picking. So we try to do lots of events, and that's just one of them, our regular monthly meeting at the Fly Club. But yes, this one coming up on the 7th will be about, that'll be me doing a presentation on chopper blues. The following one in May will be Captain Bald-Headed Bobby, and he'll be over from Oriental, and I believe he'll be doing shad or striper or a combination of the two, depends on how interested the people are and how far he gets through. But yes, mine will be on chopper blues because that's what I wanted to do, and I've kind of gotten pretty well known for that, especially since Joe Shoot sold his flats boat. But several of us will do those fish. Captain Noah Link's real good at it, his son Tanner. But there ain't many that like to take people out and do fly in top water like I do.
Well, it seems like a great. I hate using the term resource. That's an overused term. But in strictly speaking, in regards to bluefish, that this is another avenue for folks. If you want a big tug, whether it's even a Taylor blue, a smaller 1 pound, whatever blue with fly fishing, and it also makes somebody keen to his environment and the fish and understanding the fish, its migrations, its habits and habitats and things like that. It's a more thought out process as opposed to me, Mr. Live Baiter. I've made an allusion earlier about me going flounder fishing with finger mullet, or live shrimp. And that's why I learned how to throw a cast net many years ago. So it's more of a brain game, evidently, with fly fishing.
It is, yes, sir. And I'm glad you brought that up because I'd like to try to lead into that a little bit. So we've got some of those fish that hang around all year round. There was obviously a lot of those fish up in the Neuse River this year. They were already big. It's just like they stayed there, and then they just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So my theory is, just a theory, a lot of those fish that were in the river got really big and just hung out here. But let's just say that there's a group of these big fish, which you'll notice in the picture, some of them are really skinny that I'm catching this time of year. They're 27 to 34, 36 inches, maybe edging 40 inches if they're really big, and they're really skinny. And that's because they've been moving. They've gone down, they're coming back up now, and they kind of come in on Cape Lookout shoals, and it's like they kind of hit the wall there and they just hang out. And then, some years – and some years you won't catch very many. They'll stay more offshore, 5 to 7 miles. But on the years when they come in and do like they're supposed to, or we like to see them do, you'll see great big groups of them at Cape Lookout shoals. You'll see, and I'm talking maybe 1,000, and they just look like bonefish or something, look like big mullet, and they're all just sitting there on a flat with waves coming over them and their tail sticking up out of the water. It's really phenomenal. And then if the sun catches it right, you'll notice in some of those pictures, their eyes are really demon yellow, and I always try to edit where I bring that out because I just really want to just capture what it is those fish look like when I pull them out of the water because the camera dulls them down so much. But those fish will move in, and we've seen them up in the head of North River, these big 27 to 34-inch fish and bigger, all the way up above the bridge in North River eating cob mullet. They're really hard to catch that way, and that's when they're coming in for their spawn. And then that's when you'll think, Mr. Bill, when you start coming out looking for those flounder in like June or whatever, maybe picking up a few redfish or sheep's head, there's all these little tiny pesky little piranhas that you're talking about, slightly below the Taylor cut size, these little bitty guys, chop, eat all your shrimp and all that. Those should be the babies that those fish had when they start to come in March, April, May. And then that's kind of how the whole cycle starts. Some of those fish are up the river, blah, 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 we won't get into all that, but that's what it is they've coming back and they get hung up on our shoals. Some of them come in, spawn, have their babies. Some of them move on. They get harder to catch after some years it's July, some years it's mid-June. And that's what it is. We're targeting those fish in like a mass migration that happens to line up with a big spawn. And so that's why they can be a little bit more challenging because it's kind of like people say about the tarpon. Those bluefish get the spawn on their mind. And so believe it or not, the eat is not the primary thing they're concerned about. So it can be quite challenging when these fish are cruising flats with their backs out of the water, or they're in less than 3.5, 4 foot of water, or less than 5 foot of water to get them to eat something. Because everyone's like, seriously, Captain Joe? Bluefish ain't no challenge to catch. Well, I got news for you. These can be, especially when you're catching them on the flats and trying to present a lure to them and get them to eat it right in front of your face, which is absolute carnage.
Well, yes, the nature of the piranha. All right, so it's April 7th at Cox's Restaurant at 6:03 that you will be doing the seminar on fly fishing for bluefish. And I do want to bring up about the Cape Lookout Fly Fishing Club, that one of the obvious virtues, and why people join fishing clubs is that they're going to get to meet people like you, be associated with people like you. The Coconut Telegraph is going to go back and forth year round about what fly works, what doesn't, what time of year, what location, and things like that. So just give us and we're going to have to wrap this up. Just give us some final words about the club, the organization, and how somebody joining it can benefit.
Absolutely. So you've got I don't even know the compiled. Everyone likes to compile 200. I have no idea. I can tell you this: Captain Jake Jordan, one of the early members of the club, he's down guiding. He does sailfish trips with George Beckwith, or they're affiliated. They don't do them. He's got his own boat that he does them on. They have literally hundreds of world records for sailfish on the fly. He's been guiding 50 some years. Just had his 83rd birthday. You got guys like me. You got Joe Shute in there. Used to be Lefty Cray, Bob Clouser, Bob Popovich. It was the second largest fly club on the East Coast back in the day. So there's a lot, many decades of knowledge and different approaches, because there is some standardized approaches, but there's a lot of different approaches. So you don't just have techniques and lures and equipment, but you also have a pool of that. Some members selling this, members selling that. You've got a guy, I'm an older retired guy. I love to fish. I need somebody on my boat. You've got a variety of different things. You've got a whole lot of knowledge in one place at the fly club, and you've got a vast array of knowledge that's at your fingertips for $40 a year at the fly club. You don't even have to come to every meeting. We've got people who live in other states, live in other towns. We even got a member in another country, lives down in Argentina. So we've got a lot of people, a lot of knowledge available, and that's the main reason that you join a club. Is to gain knowledge. We get people who move here that have fly fished all over the world, all over the country, but there is knowledge that is unique to each area, and that's what we offer at the club. Also obviously camaraderie and the normal things that you get at the club, but really it's a lot of knowledge if you're wanting to learn an area, whether it's fly or light tackle, that we have at our disposal.
All right, Joe, thanks a whole lot. Mr. Zoom has been screaming at me saying we're running out of time. Just keep us in touch with what's going on. Send pictures and video.
I will, Mr. Bill. Thank you. Come out April 7th, Cape Lookout Fly Fishers, Cox Restaurant.
I certainly would like to thank Captain Joe Tunstall with Carolina Traditions Guide Company, and also with the Cape Lookout Fly Fishers. Go to Cox's Restaurant in Morehead City April 7th at 6:03. I love that so much. He's going to be there. He's going to be talking about how to catch these big mammoth jammas off of a fly, plus just about anything that swims in the ocean off with a fly. You can meet him face to face. I'd highly recommend you go. I'm Bill Hitchcock. Until next time, see ya.
Post your questions, comments, and concerns here on YouTube, or email them directly to Bill Hitchcock at this address.
What?